So this video is going to demonstrate simply an introduction to the data editor in SPSS. And there are two ways that one can view the data editor in SPSS. The current view here shown is the data view, and this is the way you'll look at the data editor when you're actually entering the values for your data. If you go to the bottom left-hand corner of the SPSS data editor, you'll see two tabs, one saying data view and the other saying variable view. The variable view, which you can left click on now, will take you to a view of the data editor where you can actually name your variables that you're going to be entering into the data set and control different characteristics of the variables. Just as an example, we're going to work with the data from the frequency distribution in class exercise in session 2. And this will allow us just to create one variable that represents a person's score on a test. And I'll use this to demonstrate which particular values I want you to manipulate for creating a variable. The first column in the variable view is called name, and that's actually the name of the variable. Anytime you're entering something into one of the cells in the spreadsheets in SPSS, whether it's the variable view or the data view, simply left click on the cell and then you can type directly into it, much as you can with Excel spreadsheets or Access. So the name of the variable is going to be somewhat limited by SPSS. You can't really use more than about 8 to 12 characters to name it. You can't put spaces, and it doesn't allow certain special characters. So really you want to come up with a brief name for the variable, and it has to be unique. No two variables in the data set can have the same name. I'm going to go ahead and name our variable score, so I'll type in the word score. And when I move to one of the other cells in that particular row, which you can do by using the left and right arrows, you'll see that SPSS automatically fills in the remaining values in that row as a default for that particular variable. The type of variable that's a default for SPSS is a numeric variable. But if you left click on that cell, you'll see that there are different types of variables that one can enter in SPSS. I'm going to leave this as numeric because we have here a score on a test that is in fact a numeric variable at the interval level of measurement. We can also manipulate either from within this pop-up box of variable type or within the next two columns of the variable view, the width of the column and the number of decimal places. Now the width includes the decimal places, so for example, if I have scores on tests that have essentially 2 whole number digits and 2 decimal place digits, then I need at least 4 columns of width in order to represent the variable, including the 2 decimal places. So I'll change the value of width from 8 to 4 and click OK. Now you may not have noticed it, but when I did that, the following column within the SPSS variable view actually changed from a value of 4 in the width column to 8. If you left click on that column, you can see that you can actually move up and down to change the width of the variable this way, as well as having changed it in the pop-up window. The similar thing can be done for the number of decimal places that you want to work with. The next column to the right is called label. Now here's where we're going to give the user a better description of what our variable actually is. And labels are important because they allow us as the user to produce output that gives a better description of the variable than just the name. And it's also for the reader so that when you create tables and graphs and you produce them in SPSS and you want to copy and paste them into a manuscript, it actually has a description of the variable, not just the word score. You can use spaces and special characters here, and you can have variables that have the same label if you'd like. I'm going to create a slightly more detailed label here called score on test. Because maybe I had a score on a test, maybe I had a score on a survey, maybe I had a score on an interview, so this is just a little bit more specific. Okay. The values column is something we're going to use only when we're working with categorical variables, that is, nominal variables or ordinal variables that have only a few categories. That's actually going to allow us to create labels for the different values of the variable as opposed to a label for the entire variable itself. So for example, if my variable was gender And it had two levels, level 1, which represents males, and level 2 that represents females. I could actually create labels for the numbers 1 and 2 so I can enter 1 and 2 into my data set, but what would show up in the output is the word male and female. Since I have a continuous variable here, though, using value labels is not actually appropriate. So I'm going to go ahead and skip that column and move all the way to the final column in the variable view, which is called measure. If you click on the measure variable or double click on it, you'll get a drop-down menu that gives you three different options: scale, ordinal, nominal. This relates to the levels of measurement that were discussed in session 1. The nominal level represents obviously any variable that's at the nominal level of measurement. Ordinal corresponds to the ordinal level of measurement, and then scale corresponds to both the interval and ratio level of measurement, because both of those have an equal interval scale running underneath the variable. It's important that you change these settings for the variables because that's going to determine by SPSS what types of analyses can be done with the particular variable given the scale of measurement. Okay, we're done creating the actual variables themselves. So we're going to go back to the data view and start to enter our data. Again, I go down to the tabs at the bottom left-hand portion of my screen, click on Data View, and now you'll see that the first column in the data editor says score. It's actually named the first variable score. In the data view, variables are in the columns and observations, or what's called cases, are in the rows. Now I take my raw data that's given in the in-class exercise for frequency distributions and I can start typing the data in. The first score is a 10. Now because I've set SPSS to default here to 2 decimal places for the variable, I don't have to add the 2 zeros after 10 for 10.00. It automatically will insert those decimal places in there. To move down one row to the next case, I can simply hit the Enter button or the down arrow. I'll continue entering all of the values for the data set until they're completely entered. I should note that the way I'm entering the data here is in what's called raw score form, which means that every score in the data set is actually typed into the data editor and represented as a different case. This means you'll have as many rows as you do people or cases in the data set. There are other shortcut ways to be able to set up the data, such as in frequency table form, and that's demonstrated in the next video. Okay, that's the end of this video for now. I'm going to go ahead and finish entering this data, and then when we look at the next video, I'll demonstrate how once your data is entered, you can actually start analyzing it for various types of output.